Today we're going to be talking about the just announced Omega Seamaster 300M James Bond for 60 years of the James Bond movies. And yes, this is ridiculous. I'm wearing a tuxedo talking about watches, Omega watches, another James Bond watch on YouTube, on the internet, in my living room. But I will say that I actually have an event coming up here in the near future, so I have to get this kind of adjusted. I'm not as tapered as I used to be, so I have to get it kind of let out in a few places. So I figured, hey, why not put it on for the boys here to talk about a watch that I am very excited for. This is going to be a James Bond watch that is very much like the original James Bond from the 1990s that was featured in GoldenEye. And wow, I love that Pierce Brosnan era James Bond. So we're going to be talking about that watch here, sharing the specs and some images, as well as the price and why I think this is just a killer watch. And actually, there's a very interesting mechanical piece on the case back that I'm going to share with you that I think is so cool to see kind of that kind of complication included in such an iconic watch or watch line, if you will. But additionally, Omega just announced another James Bond 60 years watch that I think is actually quite ridiculous. So we're going to start with an overwhelmingly positive watch, at least an opinion on an overwhelmingly positive watch. And then we're going to talk about a watch that I just don't understand, but maybe someone out there in the world can share in the comments below. So when that comes up, please make sure to chime in below. So this watch that we see here is right away going to be recognized as that kind of classic James Bond wave dial Omega Seamaster that was featured, like I said, in the James Bond movies like the GoldenEye and so on and so forth. The James Bond franchise has a long-standing history with the Omega Watch Company. Now, interestingly enough, you'll notice that the waves are back. That blue dialed watch, you'll see the waves are back. When they kind of moved along with the watch, this Seamaster 300 line, they removed the waves and they put them back in. They made them less frequent. And now we have that classic wavy dial that I love. And I know that pattern out there is so recognizable. So make sure if you're a wave dial guy to chime in below. But what's phenomenal about this watch is it's a little bit larger actually. So for me, it might not be the best choice because I have a smaller wrist. But for those out there that like a little bit of a larger sporting watch, this is going to be 42 millimeters in diameter with 13.15 millimeters in height. So not quite as thick as the ceramic version of this watch, but certainly thicker than the last variation of the 300M. And this is going to be because of the case back that is used with an animated mechanics component, which we will talk about in just a second. But you'll also notice that the case has a mixture of a brushed and a polished finish, which is different than some of the other Omega Seamasters that have come out since the Bond era wave dial. The Bond era wave dial is notorious for having a mixed finish case, and when people want to go get their case refinished and polished, it's really difficult. Most polishers actually don't want to touch it because the bracelet, for one, is so difficult with the mixture of finishing. But additionally, you have your unidirectional bezel that's pretty standard on the Omega Seamasters, and interestingly enough, they have come back out with a blue anodized aluminum insert. So the insert on the bezel is going to be a little bit different than what we've come accustomed to, but I think as time rolls on, we'll see how they actually put that into the watch here. There's still limited information around the bezel. Further on, you have your screw down crown, which is to be had in most dive watches at this day. But interestingly, when we're talking about things that are screwed down, the case back on this watch is not screwed down, but it's screwed in. There's screws that go in the case back that are going to be used to hold that case back in. Once again, this is going to be because of the way that the case back has this animated graphic on the back that is going to be just like what you would see in a James Bond opening sequence. You have your James Bond character, but behind it you have that pattern, and the pattern is going to rotate, and that is going to be connected to the running center seconds hand gear train, and it's going to be moving, and it's going to make one complete rotation every 60 seconds, just like a seconds hand would. That is so cool to see. Kind of an interesting little complication there thrown in as an Easter egg in a James Bond Seamaster dive watch. Now, some people that criticize this are going to notice that it does have a helium escape valve, which I don't mind. I don't think it really takes a lot away from the watch, but some people say, hey, you know, they really do wish that escape valve wasn't there. They don't really need it. It kind of just takes away from the watch, and they kind of wish they removed it and kind of just put a hole or a flap in the side of the case like some dive watches do. But that is going to be remaining here on this watch. I think it's safe to say that Omega is not getting rid of that anytime soon. And you have double sapphire crystal, so on the front and on the back, as well as 300 meters water resistance. So changing the type of case back didn't really do a lot for us here and losing water resistance. The dial, let's look at that dial. That beautiful blue dial with the waves. I am so excited to see them come back out with what I consider to be the Omega dive watch, and the Bond era dive watch I would put right up there in terms of recognizability, right against any Rolex Submariner. For that reason, we've had so many of them in the door at Del Rey Watch, and they do sell. They sell quicker than the modern variations of the watch. We have a few modern Omega Seamaster 300 dive watches that have been kind of there for a little bit of time, but the wave dial Bond eras just go so quickly. People love them, it's nostalgic, and it is in. Now, driving this watch is going to be the Caliber 8806 coaxial in-house movement. Of course, it's automatic, which is to be expected, but it is a certified master chronometer, and that is going to be when Omega is going to go above and beyond using their MATOS certification, very likely here to reach better than chronometer standards using their own ratings that many brands have gone ahead and adapted to above and beyond the COSC certification, including additional things like magnetic resistance testing, additional shock absorbing testing. Now, the interesting thing about this bracelet is the bracelet is going to be a Milanese bracelet. So it's not going to be kind of the type of bracelet you would see coming stock on the other Seamasters in the 300M line. This is going to be much more in line with the bracelet you would see on the other limited Bond with the faux lume aging that we picture here. So that particular Bond did ship on a very similar style Milanese bracelet. But the interesting thing is that many of the Omega watches can be had today on this type of bracelet. So maybe there will be some ability to put one of the more classic Diver 300M bracelets on the watch. I personally don't mind too much because I think that the current Gen 300M dive watch bracelets are a little bit chunkier and thicker. So if you get a bigger watch here with a thicker case, maybe you kind of offset that difference with the Milanese thinner bracelet. I think that's a pretty cool choice. And we're going to be seeing a retail price that is higher than your 300M. This is going to be coming in at 7,000 Swiss francs, or about 7,400 US dollars at the time. And it's going to be coming out sometime Q1 of 2023. I personally am very excited to see this watch hit the shelves. I think it's a knockout. I think it's a no-brainer. The pricing is a little bit high for a Bond Seamaster, and I think for a fraction of the price, you could have the original. But if you want that modern spec, you like that animation on the case back, which is just so cool. I think that this is a pretty great choice. Maybe if you can even get a little bit of a discount, we'll see where the watch market goes. So very excited. Let me know what you think about this in the comments below. And while I have you here, we need to talk about kind of I'll let you decide actually first. I'll let you decide, but this is the other version of the Omega Seamaster Bond 60 years watch. This is going to have a gem set bezel, that interesting pattern, meteorite/camouflage pattern dial at the time of the shooting. It hasn't quite been explained what the dial is made out of. I think we'll come to find out that it's likely going to be an interesting material, or maybe some type of embossment there. But the watch is crafted in their Canopus gold, their white gold, the version kind of what Omega calls their white gold in contrast to something like the Sedna gold, which they offer. I don't know what I think about this watch. If James Bond showed up, for action wearing this kind of watch, I think he would kind of get laughed at, right? I don't know. That's just not the Bond that I grew up with. I don't know about wearing these gem set watch. It's not really rugged. It's not kind of action fighting. That's not what James Bond was about. But it's interesting, right? For someone that maybe doesn't really care about holding true to the James Bond franchise, I get it. Hey, these are watches. It's not like, James Bond is real or anything. It's an interesting looking watch. I mean, I wouldn't actually mind wearing the watch per se. I just don't think it's really like, fits the brand image. But that's watches at the end of the day, right? Rolex and Omega kind of go back and forth, and Rolex has a gem set line, so Omega's probably saying, hey, we need to do this. Let's keep in mind they were, going after the deep sea. Omega came out with their ultra deep, and they were going back and forth on all the different lines. Now they have a gem set line. I don't know how many of these will be produced. I do think it's cool. I'd love to try one out, put one on the wrist, maybe even wear it a little bit, but I don't think that it hits the Bond franchise. What do you guys think about this watch as well? I would love to see it and hear it in the comments below. Actually, on the wrist today, I have an Omega Seamaster Aquaterra. Got the Patek 5110 world time here, review coming soon. Guys, also please check out my previous video that I launched where I talk about the Pope's watch that's up for auction for a really good cause, along with so many other watches, including one watch that I donated for a very special cause. So previous video, make sure to check that out. Guys, please do not forget to thumbs up, like, and subscribe. DelReyWatch.com, where we do have plenty of Omega watches in stock. And we'll see you next time. You've been chatting with John P.